Welcome back to the Footy Frontline Podcast. Nick Tabano and Ollie Caffrey back to review a massive Easter weekend in footy. Plenty of storylines emerging from throughout the competition. It was plenty of drama. There were stoppages. There was everything going on. I mean, it really had everything this past weekend of footy.
Yeah, the longest round for the year as well. Starts on the Thursday night, then finishes on the Monday. So, yeah, plenty happening, like you said. So we'll get stuck into it.
Well, the best place to start is we'll go right back to the start. We'll go to Thursday night. It was Builders, the game that both teams quite simply had to win. It was Collingwood that did emerge with their first win of the season in that grand final rematch against Brisbane. The Lions are now in the same position where Collingwood were last week, heading into round 4 this weekend, 0-3. There's been a lot of chatter from the media a little bit about what's been going on with, some WhatsApp messages as well, and talk about divide. But purely from an on-field standpoint, the Lions are 0-3. How do you analyse the Lions coming out of that loss against the Pies?
Yeah, that game on Thursday night, you go back to the grand final last year, probably the greatest grand final in the history of the game. Just those two games, you compare that, but just not anywhere close. Like the standard of that game, both teams really, like Collingwood's pressure obviously was way up. They really primed themselves for that game and were very good in a lot of aspects of the game, but even to their standards, they're still a way off last year. But yeah, the Lions, their forward connection is just completely diabolical at the moment. That is the main issue for them at the moment. The third week in a row, they won the inside 50 count. They were pretty good around clearances, but it's just their forwards just not doing the job. Eric Hipwood's come under big scrutiny this week, and deservedly so after that performance. Just couldn't grab a mark. Charlie Cameron way down. It looks like he's carrying a bit of a knee issue. He was all strapped up before the game and looked pretty proper. He's just not his same old self. And yeah, just bizarre call at selection as well, bringing in another tall Darcy Fort. The 3 tall forward line hasn't really worked for the Lions at times. It's cost them games, and they went back to it on Thursday night. So when those teams came through on Wednesday night before the Thursday night game, I thought, yeah, this is a very interesting call. So we'll see what happens. I wasn't prepared to say it was a stupid call at the time, but yeah, in hindsight, it was absolutely ridiculous. The pressure, their ball entry inside 50 just was non-existent, and yeah, just a shadow of themselves at the moment. The last 5 years have been probably the best attacking team in the comp. They've got dangerous options up forward all around, but yeah, don't look like it at the moment, and yeah, issues there for the Lions big time.
Do you see it being something that will, I guess, naturally, just as you spoke about winning the inside 50 count, I guess when you talk about law of averages, eventually you'd think that would yield a positive sort of return given history with Brisbane and having so many, an array of attacking options? Do you see it eventually fixing itself, or do you think that this might be a sign of a greater issue with Brisbane, that maybe, I don't want to say they've been worked out, but that maybe that there are some more issues as they roll into the rest of this season?
Yeah, it's definitely fixable. They've shown for 5 years they're probably the best attacking team in the comp, so definitely fixable. It's just their entries going inside 50s, their forwards not marking balls, their crummers just not getting to the right spot. So those issues are definitely fixable. And you go back to the first quarter and their intensity was just way off the ball. They were nowhere near it. Collingwood probably should have been further in front, really, just the way they dominated and how poor the Lions actually were. You go back to the way Collingwood played at times last year. If they were playing that sort of way last year against the Lions, and they showed in the first quarter, it would have been all over at quarter time, probably 10 goals to nothing. So, yeah, I definitely think there's a fix there, and maybe there were some underlying issues stemming from the off-season. Who knows? But, yeah, it's never just one thing why a team is struggling. You go back to some of the injuries they've had, the ACLs. They've got 3 guys with ACLs at the moment. And, yeah, the long-time football administration boss, Nicole Duncan, she actually passed away early in the year. So she was basically like a second mum to a lot of those Lions boys, especially the guys that have been there for a long time, Ryan Lester, Dane Zorko. So who knows what sort of impact that's had on the club. And probably Chris Fagan as well. She was a very big influence on him and just helping him out with all the little stuff that you don't really sort of think about from the outside. So, yeah, there's definitely issues there, but it's definitely not the one issue. And, yeah, obviously the WhatsApp messages and the US trips being highlighted, but yeah, who knows if that's having an impact, and it probably has maybe 1%, 2% of an impact, but you go across the board and the stories that have been reported, there's nothing to suggest there's any rifts between the players, and that would have got out by now. If there were actually genuine rifts, stories would have started to emerge, players would have spoken off the record, you'd think, but yeah, there's no proof that there's actually fractured relationships within the club. So maybe that it's all out in the open now, it might have had a galvanising effect on the group. So we'll see this week, and there's no better chance to get on the board than playing North Melbourne, who are really struggling. Their midfield probably okay. Defence is just going to be a massive issue for them going forward. They just don't have the options there. And poor Toby Pink and Aiden Core, who are never going to be your number one key defenders. A golden opportunity for the Lions this week to really get back into form for some of those forwards.
Well, I think the whole WhatsApp story, I think it's a non-story if Brisbane's 3-0, right? Like
absolutely, it doesn't come out.
Even if it's 1-2 or 2-1, no one hears about it. I mean, you know, it's obviously just been there as sort of that. It's an easy sort of, it's a bit of low-hanging fruit, I guess, to kind of just go, oh, that happened. It must be causing a riff. Brisbane have been quite steadfast that it hasn't. So, you know, we'll take them on their word for that one. Moving on from the Lions, we'll talk a little bit more about that North Melbourne game in a sec. But another big talking point from the weekend came from the Monday game between Geelong and Hawthorn, and it was Jack Ginnivan. It feels like we're back where we were for the last couple of years with Ginnivan. A few non-calls that didn't go his way, some high tackles. There's been a lot of conjecture about, you know, does he play for the free kicks? You know, does he get umpired differently? And you can't help that when you go back and you watch the game that there was some non-calls that I think, you know, he probably should have gotten, and the AFL have already come out and acknowledged that there were definitely two that, you know, he should have definitely won some free kicks for. But, you know, you watch this game. I mean, what did you think about, you know, when you see it firsthand? Because, you know, watching as a Collingwood supporter, you could notice it the last few years that definitely there was some times where you're like, how is this not being paid? What did you notice on Monday afternoon at the G?
Oh, it was completely obvious. Sitting in the box, some of those calls you just thought had to be paid, and you thought, okay, it's a matter of time now before they're going to call this, and it just got called play on. Like, he didn't get a single call. It doesn't matter if he's playing for them. If he gets taken high, he gets coat-hangered. Like, there were times, like, during his time at Collingwood when I think there was a game against Essendon.
Famous Mason Redmond one.
Mason Redmond cleaned him up and just play on. So there's no doubt umpires are looking at Jack Ginnivan, knowing his history and going, this guy is playing for free, just don't give it to him. Because if it's any other player, even guys like Joel Selwood and some guys that, have sort of worked out the art of dodging tackles and being able to get taken high, they still get the free kicks paid. But with Jack Ginnivan, I don't know what it is, but yeah, the umpires really have it in for him at the moment, and the umpires, the AFL has basically admitted that is the case at times, and he's not getting some of those calls. So we'll see what happens this week, and no better way to see how it goes and come out against Collingwood. So yeah, you'd think there would be some sort of adjustment there after all the controversy that's happened this week. So yeah, Jack is just, he's great for the game, I reckon. He speaks his mind. He's electric. He's probably the most talked about. I don't think he's even played 50 games yet, but yeah, he's just always in the headlines, speaks his mind, did a podcast during the week as well, detailing about some of his things that went on at Collingwood and the exit there. So yeah, I reckon he's great for the game, and he's just been dudded a bit at the moment.
Damned if you do, damned if you don't with Jack Ginnivan at the moment, it seems, especially with the umpiring calls, because there was a point where he was winning them, and then there was all this talk about, well, he has to start getting penalised because he's playing for free kicks, and now it's gone the other way where it's like, well, he's actually been umpired completely differently. It's almost like finding that sweet spot, because look, there are times where you can tell he does blatantly pay for them, and there are rules that do show that if you do play for it and, you know, it's there, it's going to be paid holding the ball. But there are times where, you know, if you get coat hanged, as you mentioned, it's in the laws of the game. It's a free kick to Jack Ginnivan. And you can't have two sets of rules for, you know, the 43 other players, or the, you know, if you include the subs, the 45 other players that are going to take the field that day, and have one set of rules for Jack Ginnivan because he has a history. it's just blatantly not fair. It's not how the game should be. It's not how it should be with any sport. So you'd hope that, as time goes on, we start to see a little bit more consistency with that, because there are a few that I'm pretty sure that there was a missed non-call with Ginnivan. Then Dylan Moore, I think, got a high free kick only minutes later or seconds later and got exactly the same free kick. So you have to be asking the question, like, what is it that Dylan Moore did differently to Jack Ginnivan? Or is it just because there is the Jack Ginnivan, I don't know if stigma is the right word, but the history of that works against him, which I don't think is very fair.
That's not fair at all. It shouldn't be like that. The umpires shouldn't have this preconceived idea going into a game that, okay, Ginnivan plays for free kicks, we're not going to give it to him. That's just ridiculous.
Absolutely.
That just shouldn't be happening. So, yeah, hopefully it balances itself out over time, because if it's just going to be a weekly thing where he's not getting paid free kicks, that's just a bit of a blight on the game.
Well, the spotlight will be on, I guess, on Sunday for both those reasons, playing against his former team and then seeing what happens when that first, I guess, high free kick happens. Well, because after the AFL coming out and acknowledging it and Lauren Kane saying that, will we see a change on Sunday? I guess we'll wait and see what happens in that game on Sunday evening. And Gather Rounds, it's here, it's back this week, the second iteration. We're going back to Adelaide. Ollie, you're heading over to Adelaide. You're looking forward to all the festivities this weekend?
Yeah, I was overseas last year, so I missed all the hype around it. Didn't even watch a game live last year on TV. So to be getting over there and probably seeing 3 games in person, yeah, it's going to be a really good time.
Adelaide Oval, are you heading out to some of the other ones?
Doing all 3. Adelaide Oval Thursday night, seeing the Lions Friday at Norwood, and then Saturday going out to Mount Barker for the Swans-Eagles game, which could get very ugly. So
yes.
But yeah, it'd be good to check out all the grounds that are getting used for Gather Rounds.
Well, 9 games this weekend, no one having the bye, plenty of football happening right across the city in Adelaide, and it starts off on Thursday night. Talking about blowtorch, it's going to be firmly on the Crows. They take on Melbourne. 0-3 Adelaide are probably the worst loss of the 3 on Friday night. They were nowhere near it. They couldn't generate any scores. They looked like they were in the mud all game. It was played perfectly to Fremantle's tempo, while their opponents, Melbourne, a very impressive win against Port Adelaide in a game that, quite frankly, they had no right winning given the stats and the numbers. Can you see this being the game that Adelaide finally turned things around against the Melbourne team, who are playing a second straight game here at Adelaide Oval and have turned Adelaide into a bit of a home away from home for the last week?
I can, only because they have to. It was sort of their coming out party last year that everyone started to take them seriously. They absolutely thrashed Carlton in the corresponding game last year. So, yeah, it's 0-3. They're playing a lot worse this time than they were last year. But, yeah, they're like the Lions. They were one of the best attacking teams last year, and they just can't get near it this year. 4 goals against Freo last week was just, baffling. I just don't know what's going on there. It's similar issues to the Lions with the forward connection. But this just has to be the game they turn around. The odds are pretty even. Melbourne are slight favourites, but yeah, I think at the Adelaide Oval, they just have to respond. And I think maybe Melbourne, they set themselves up for that game against Port Adelaide. It was such a big win for them. So I don't know if there will be some sort of flat spot this week after just building themselves up for that. Jack Viney's milestone game, they won the Adelaide Oval, backs against the wall. And like you said, didn't have any really right to win that game. And it was sort of like the reverse Melbourne game from last year. Like they got dominated in inside 50s and were just, their forward line's functioning really well at the moment, where it wasn't at all last year. It was dysfunctional at times. So yeah, on form, you would think Melbourne very easily, but I think just got a feeling that the Crows might just really build themselves up for this one and sort of kickstart their season and take a bit of pressure off Matthew Nicks.
I actually think Adelaide's going to win this one. I get this feeling it's going to be the get-right game. It'll be a great way for them to kick off Gather Rounds. Last year, they kicked it off with that big win against Carlton. Obviously, things were a lot different for Adelaide at this point in the season, but I think the pressure's on them. You'd expect that if they can start strong, if Tex can get going, the crowd can get into it, it's going to make things hard for Melbourne. But Melbourne won't be fazed by this because they've just beaten, probably in front of a more hostile crowd against Port Adelaide, against a team that is right now, at least, a better team than Adelaide, coming away with that win and sort of doing it against all odds when they were down by quite a bit in that third quarter and did really well then to stem the flow and win that game. But you get a sense it just has to turn around for Adelaide eventually, and I think it'll be this week against Melbourne, who maybe, another week away from home, taking on a team Adelaide that just quite simply, it's non-negotiable. They've got to win this game, 0-4, and you're putting a line through finals from there. So I think the Crows win that one on Thursday. Friday, Brisbane versus North Melbourne. We spoke about it a little bit earlier. Brisbane should win this game quite comfortably. Both teams winless. North Melbourne, I think against Carlton, they were competitive for a bit. I mean, you could talk about umpiring, you could talk about some of the decisions that went against them, but overall just got overran by a very good Carlton team that was quite simply too strong last week. But do you see it changing for the Kangas, or is this going to be just a Brisbane win to get off the mark?
You'd think the Lions just respond. They just have to, like, all the attention's been on them this week, so it could galvanise them this week, and yeah, they simply have to. If they go 0-4, it's already a disaster every year. It is to an extent already, but yeah, if you go 0-4, lose to North Melbourne, then the season's a write-off. So I think they do get themselves up for this one, and North Melbourne, they'll go 0-4. But yeah, there've been better signs for North Melbourne this year. It's just the defence, like I spoke about earlier. Yeah. It's just going to be a massive worry for them over the next few years. They just don't have any key position, tall defensive stocks coming through. They've drafted through the midfield. They've got really an elite midfield, and like the next 3 or 4 years, there's just going to be so many guys that can run through there, and they won't be able to fit them all in. But yeah, their forward line's looking a bit better, but again, Nick Larkin needs more help. So I think the Lions just really respond in this one and get some critics off their back.
Well, the hard part for North is you talk about key position players, Callum Coleman-Jones as well. Achilles, that's another Achilles at North Melbourne.
Second in 3 weeks.
Yeah, it's a bit of a curse at the moment. I think Todd Viney did his Achilles as well.
Yeah,
so,
he's wobbling around at the moment.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure Brady Rawlings, like it seems like it's just a bit of an epidemic going on there at Arden Street. But yeah, I think Brisbane will be too strong on Friday and will claim their first win of the season. Friday night, now, this is a big one because the Bombers are up and about. It wasn't a great win against St Kilda. It was scrappy. It was in the mud. It was, it was tight. It wasn't the game you're going to be in a rush to go back and watch the full replay of anytime soon. But a big win against St Kilda. These are the games you got to win when you're going for finals. But taking on a Port Adelaide team that have to respond after that loss against Melbourne, I feel like this game's almost a flip of a coin because the Bombers have got all the momentum after that win against St Kilda. But Port Adelaide, they just have to respond after that loss against Melbourne.
Yeah, like you said, it is a flip of the coin game. The 2 matches they played last year, they were both within a kick. And yeah, you go back to the MCG game, Port Adelaide win after siren, Dan Houston roost. Like, it is one of the greatest all-time kicks after the siren to win a game. It was in the wet on the boundary from more than 50 out. I was there covering that game. It was just absolutely insane. But yeah, Essendon are going to really take it up to them. They were really buoyed by that win on Saturday against the Saints. Like, not too many people gave them a chance of winning that. But yeah, to do it in the way they did, they were down. They had to be resilient. Like, they blew a lot of chances at the start of the last quarter. They were dominating that last quarter and probably should have got in front earlier. But yeah, Jake Stringer stepped up and won them that game. So they're feeling pretty good about themselves at the moment, the Bombers. So they'll give themselves a huge chance. But I just think Port, gather around, they just have to respond. And I think they will. No other reason except they're at home, gather around, they're coming off a loss, so I think they'll bounce back.
Yeah, I think Port Adelaide win this game. As much as it was an impressive win in terms of it being gutsy against St Kilda, it wasn't a win that made you stand up and go, the Bombers are here, they're here to make a statement this year. It was just that game, like when you look back at the end of the season, you just got to get the 4 points and almost run with it because they're the 50-50 games between those sides battling for finals. The Jake Stringer factor, I think, creates a bit of a subplot because he's been so good, and you saw what he did against St Kilda, literally willed them over the line in that last quarter with those great plays. I mean, he atoned for the, maybe a bit of a stiff call going against him with that 50-metre penalty. But, I think Port Adelaide overall will be chomping at the bit to get a win against the Bombers. Saturday, West Coast against Sydney. West Coast still winless against the Sydney side that, a bit of a shocking loss against Richmond at the MCG, but all signs are pointing to a get-right win for the Swans on Saturday afternoon.
Oh, absolutely. That is probably the worst possible result for West Coast, that the Swans went down against Richmond, because they're going to be super hungry to bounce back from that one. And yeah, there wasn't really too many things to be concerned about for Sydney. It was just one of those games. Richmond were really hyped up for that one. The pressure was amazing throughout the course of the game, and the Swans just were a bit off and came down to the wire. So, but you go across town early in the day, and the Eagles, again, were just absolutely woeful. Like, nothing sums up their last 3 years more than Tim Kelly's kick. I think it was during the second quarter, tried to have a shot at goal, set shot, and just slips over and botches it. So they are just in a world of pain at the moment, and there's just no way out that I see right now. So we know what happened last year between these two sides. Sydney cracked 200 and won by a record margin, and then there were calls after that game for Adam Simpson to be sacked. And even the West Australia, they were going hard on him, and they ended up sticking with him. So, I think this could get really ugly. Taylor Adams comes comes in for his first game for the Swans after that trade from Collingwood. So, I'd be surprised if this one is under 10 goals.
I don't know if we'll get 200. I don't know if we're going to get to that level of, thrashing, but I do think Sydney win this game very, very comfortably. I remember checking the scores of the Bulldogs West Coast game. See, West Coast kicked, I think it was 2 of the first 3 goals, and thinking, all right, maybe this is going to be a bit more competitive. We're going to get a repeat of last year, but you check again a half an hour later and you saw what the Bulldogs did. It seems like when things go bad for West Coast right now, like off the field, on the field, it goes really bad, and they just don't have a way of stemming the flow when a team gets a run on them. It's actually quite stark that this has been the case now for 3 straight seasons, that they just can't stem the bleeding whatsoever. And even when you still have a bunch of still quite experienced players in that team as well, I know they have injuries and they've got a bunch of kids as well, but it's just amazing seeing, like, at least with North Melbourne, there's a bit of fight, there's a bit of gusto and everything. West Coast, it's once it gets too hard, it's almost like they just lay down and take the loss. It's quite incredible to watch. Saturday twilight, this is going to be, I think, potentially the game of the round.
I reckon 100%. Yeah.
Fremantle, Carlton. The both teams are up and about. Fremantle 3-0, Carlton 3-0. Fremantle have looked really good defensively, taking on one of the best attacks in the league in Carlton. I don't know, but I feel like this game is going to be separated by less than 10 points either way.
I'm with you, yeah. I reckon it's going to be so close. And, like you said, the defence of Freo have started on fire. Alex Pearce, Luke Ryan, they are just rocks down there. And, you compare that to what Harry Mackay and Charlie Kerner had to face last week, a really inexperienced North Melbourne defence, and they went to town, obviously. But, it's going to be a lot harder for them this week with Alex Pearce and Luke Ryan really guarding that defensive 50 pretty strongly. So I think that the Dockers might get up in this one. I have just the feeling that they'll do it again. They're playing some really good footy. They got themselves up for some bigger games last year and lost the ones that they should have won. So, they've started on fire, Freo, and I reckon they can keep that going.
I think if they win this, it legitimises their start, because as much as the win against Brisbane looked impressive, now it's starting to look like it's losing a little bit of power. I think the win against North Melbourne was good in the way they came back, but it still was a bit okay. The win against Adelaide, you win at home against a team that's struggling, but you beat Carlton. Like, that is the real statement, because Carlton, everyone's putting as one of the flag contenders. It really takes you to that next level. You know what? I agree. I think the Dockers win this game. I get this sense that things are working in quite a way for them, and it's all heading in a positive trajectory. It's going to be tough for Carlton, taking on a team that they probably haven't played a defence like this all season. Against Brisbane, it was tough early, but when they got the run on them, they really got the run on them. And we know what Fremantle are going to do. And they're going to make this game as hard as possible for Carlton. It's going to feel like every time, the contested play, it's going to really feel in the mud for them. So I think that the Dockers are going to come away with a win on Saturday twilight. Another big game Saturday night. Talk about, if you go to Adelaide Oval on Saturday, you're getting a treat of games, so that doubleheader. Bulldogs versus Geelong. The Dogs have found some form in the last few weeks. Geelong have looked quite good as well. It's been hard to kind of get a consistent read on both, because as much as they've been good, they haven't really played anyone of significance. I know Geelong's win against Adelaide was good, but the Crows are still winless. The win against St Kilda was, a decent one as well. But the Bulldogs wins as well have come against Gold Coast in Ballarat and West Coast at Marvel. For both these two teams, I think, talk about legitimising their starts, getting a win here would certainly do that.
Yeah, massive game for both teams. And Geelong go 3-0 after they were 0-3 last year for their premiership defence. So they've started beautifully and, did a pretty easy on Easter Monday. Like there were a couple of periods there when Hawthorn challenged and looked okay, but yeah, they had that game in the bag at quarter time, really. Tom Hawkins just ageless. So it keeps going.
Yeah.
I reckon he could play on for another 2 years, really.
Yeah.
400 games. But for some reason, Geelong just have the wood over the Bulldogs. Like under Chris Scott against Luke Beveridge, like the record is pretty amazing. I know the Bulldogs got them at the end of last season, but Geelong were missing half a side.
It was kind of a nothing game for Geelong at that point.
Yeah, it was a finals for them. Yeah. So I think Geelong with this one, the Bulldogs, it's hard to read. They played West Coast and they just did what they had to do against a really weakened team. And then Gold Coast, like they play really well in Ballarat. They're always probably going to win that one after getting off to that good start with the breeze. So yeah, Geelong, I think just have too many weapons across all areas. And yeah, the younger players are really starting to step up now. On Easter Monday, saw Tanner Bruin have a brilliant first half. Jai Clark showed some signs in the midfield. And yeah, Toby Conway in the ruck was his second game, but he was really impressive. And if I was Geelong, I'll just keep him in there. Yeah, Stanley, he's probably in his last year, really. Maybe 2 years he at most got left. But yeah, I think Toby Conway's the future and really impressive in his second game. Like to play that well on Easter Monday, I think, yeah, you sure have to persist with him now.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, he also showed a lot when they played. I think his debut was actually against the Bulldogs in that final game. And even talking about another young gun, I mean, Ollie Henry, just going from strength to strength. Like he's looking like a real talent. I mean, we saw it when he was in his younger days, even at Collingwood, but since he's come across to Geelong, he's really flourishing being back up the highway. So, you know, I know that caused a bit of a stir amongst Pies fans when he was homesick and it was only a 1 hour drive, but you know, being back in the home comforts of being in Geelong and the way he has thrived playing alongside, I mean, who better to learn off than Tom Hawkins and Jeremy Cameron, right? So, you know, he's really thriving. And I think they're going to win this one as well. I think the Bulldogs, I don't want to say it's been a bit of a red herring, but we just don't know. I mean, my mind just can't help but go back to that Melbourne game where they played a good side and they got blown out of the water. I think Geelong are coming with plenty of momentum. They play Adelaide Oval quite well. I mean, that win against Adelaide shows it, and I think that they'll come away with a win against the Dogs. Sunday, the expansion sides are in action. Gold Coast against GWS. GWS, both sides had the week off this week. GWS, of course, are everyone's sort of flag favourite at the moment, given the way they've started this season. Gold Coast, 2 wins to start the year, but then a disappointing loss against the Bulldogs going into the bye. How do you see this one playing out? Because it's been hard to get a read on Gold Coast, but GWS, I mean, it's all heading in a positive trajectory for them.
Yeah, very hard to read because they had a week off last week, both teams. So, yeah, how they respond after the bye, it's going to be really interesting having that so early in the season. So, you think with how the Giants have opened the season, those first few games were really impressive to blow Collingwood away like that. And, yeah, they've just done it pretty easy. So, Gold Coast did have that blip against the Bulldogs. But, yeah, they showed enough signs in that game. It was just, Ballarat is one of those really tricky grounds. You got the breeze, the unique conditions. No one really plays there. So it is a bit hard to read that game. And Bulldogs were always going to bounce back, I reckon, in that game. So I think the Giants, just because they are a bit more experienced, have weapons on every line. Like their defence is brilliant. The midfield's so deep. Forward line is just totally firing. Jesse Hogan's in terrific form. And Toby Green, he hasn't really started the season as we know he can. So he's definitely got something more left in him as well. So I think the Giants.
Yeah, I think GWS win this game, but I think the neutral territory makes this one a little bit more closer. I think Gold Coast put up a good fight. I don't think this is going to be a blowout by any sense, and you get a sense that Damien Hardwick's going to have this team galvanised. I don't think he would have liked the fact at all that the way they've played probably for the last 5 quarters. I mean, you think about the way they finished against Adelaide, the loss against the Bulldogs. I actually think they won the inside 50 count against the Bulldogs, just couldn't convert. They were just poor defensively. So I think there's still enough for them to go into this game with some confidence that they could get something from it. But GWS is just in such good form at the moment, and I think that they'll just have a bit too much strength down the track as get towards the latter stages of that game, probably just run over them in the end. Sunday afternoon, Richmond against the Saints. Now, if Richmond had Tom Lynch and Noah Bolts, I'd feel a lot more confident going in a Richmond way after the way they played against Sydney. But with those two players out now for an extended period, that injury list just continues to mount for the Tigers. Every time there's a positive, it feels like that there are 3 negatives that come back the other way. And the fact they're now losing their 2 key forwards for a long period of time just really hampers any chance of them potentially getting a win here against the Saints.
Yeah, absolute hammer blow to lose Tom Lynch for maybe the season. A hamstring tendon injury. They are very painful and lengthy. So he was really good against Sydney and influential in their win. So to cop that after it was such a brave performance from the Tigers, such a rousing performance. They had 45,000 there. It felt like about 90,000 in the last quarter when the pressure was really on. And to get over the line against the premiership contender, that's going to do a lot for Adam Uze and a young group. But St Kilda, on the other hand, they were so disappointing at Marvel Stadium. I know they have some injuries as well. Max King wasn't there, but yeah, it was a game they really should have won. Just butchered so many chances in that first half. And yeah, their forward line connection was lacking without Max King, and they just missed so many chances. And that'd be a really hard loss for Saints supporters and Ross Lyon to take. So yeah, you have to look at the ins and the outs. So out goes, like I said, Lynch and Bolter, and Max King comes back in after the one-game suspension. So St Kilda just have to win this game. There's no excuses. They go 1-3 after losing against a weak in Richmond. There's going to be a lot of questions asked. So I think they get the job done pretty easily, actually.
I think they should win this game. And as you said, if they do lose this, that would be a horror loss, given as well that Richmond also without Liam Baker is also suspended for this week. I think St Kilda will bounce back. But something tells me, just seeing how Adam Uze's put out his team, they're going to give it a red-hot crack. Like, they are not afraid to take it to their opposition. And I think even without the likes of Lynch and Bolter around the ground, I think they'll be able to put pressure on. But it's just who's going to kick the goals. That's the question. You know, they've lost in the last year. You know, Jack Riewoldt to retirement, Lynch to now a second potentially season-ending injury. Noah Bolter gets thrown forward, you know, from where he plays his best footy in defence. He's now unavailable. You look back, they don't have the depth. So it's a lot of pressure on young Kazitsky, you know, to try and step up, and maybe or Samson Ryan.
Lafau.
Yeah, Lafau as well.
Spoke to him after the game on Sunday. He's an absolute character.
Yeah.
Great to see him get his first win and kick 2 goals. So yeah, a lot of pressure for some of those younger guys to just step up.
He's already a cult hero amongst Richmond fans. If he has a big game against St Kilda, regardless of the results, that's going to go to another level. But I think St Kilda will just be too strong and will get their second win of the campaign. Final game of the round, Collingwood against Hawthorn, the Jack Ginnivan derby, essentially. You spoke about the fires have already been stoked after Jack Ginnivan went on Tommy Sheridan's podcast and was quite forthright about what happened after the grand final. And
love it.
You know, very honest about the exit meetings, and no one contacted me to stick around. It was as brutal as it gets. And I mean, this is now, it seems like there's a bit of a trend. We've seen a few Collingwood players throughout the last few years have exited and had a bit to say afterwards, but Jack Ginnivan the latest. Do you see Hawthorn getting up for this one? Because if there ever was a game for them to do it, it would be this one against Collingwood, who are back in, well, wouldn't say back in form, but at least back on the winners list after that win against Brisbane.
Yeah, I wouldn't say they're not without a chance, but you just think Collingwood, they might get on a bit of a roll now after, just their pressure was immense on Thursday night. That's what won them the game. Just their tackling intensity was superb. So, yeah, Jack Ginnivan also said on that podcast they should be having this game at the MCG. They'd get 90,000 there.
Is that wrong? Yeah.
Yeah, especially after this week.
Yeah.
As well, with what he said and the umpiring controversy around him. So, yeah, I think they can go pretty close to packing out the Adelaide Oval. But, yeah, I think Collingwood wins this game. But Hawthorn have shown enough signs, like they have the last couple of years under Sam Mitchell. There are periods there when they look pretty good. It's just Collingwood are, I think, way too experienced. And, yeah, they should get the job done.
The thing is that gives me concern, I think, on a Collingwood side is that Hawthorn have been Collingwood's bogey team for the last decade and a bit. I think Collingwood's only won 3 times since 2011 prelim, which is just an incredible...
3 times. That is extraordinary.
Now, of course, that was mainly the Buckley-Clarkson sort of, you know, I think that they won, I think it was 2017, 2020, and then 2022. So it's been one-way traffic for a lot of this period that Hawthorn, whenever it's been Clarkson or Mitchell in charge. And last year, remember what happened in that meeting at the end of last year where Hawthorn battered Collingwood like it was. Yeah, and Nick Dacos got hurt. He was being, targeted before that by Finn McGuinness. I wonder if they'll bring him back for this game.
Oh, they 100%.
Yeah, they have to.
Even just a psychological thing, just like put him there, line him up next to Nick Dacos, see what happens.
Well, if Nick Dacos now playing off half back, that's the other added wrinkle is that now he's been moved back there. So does that change things? I don't think so. I think Collingwood win this game, but Hawthorn are going to make it hard for them. It's going to be a brutal contest. I think it's going to be very physical. I know that Jack Ginnivan would still be a much loved. He's definitely amongst the Collingwood fan base, still loved. He's a premiership player. He's a cult figure for the time he was there. But I think some of those comments, I think that there's a certain number 4 at Collingwood who'd be looking at that first tackle on Jack Ginnivan by the name of Braden Maynard, who I think will be looking to maybe lay the first blow. And I think don't be surprised if there's some spot fires because Guinea, he knows these players like the back of his hand. He'll know the right things to say to try and roll them up. It'll be a bit of a friendly sort of scuffle. I think if there's any tip, there will be a scuffle at some point in this game. It maybe might not even be involved with Jack Ginnivan. I think that the Collingwood players will be on high alert that if Finn McGuinness or any of those Hawthorn players start getting into Nick Dacos, they'll be onto them in an instant. So I'm looking forward to that one from more of a theatre standpoint. So I think, though, Collingwood, when it's all said and done, I think they'll just have too much. Hawthorn have a couple of injuries as well. Nick Watson and Mitch Lewis. I think Mitch Lewis under an injury cloud this week.
Oh, yeah, Mitch Lewis, no chance of playing. He's out with a hamstring. And then, unfortunate for Nick Watson because he was really lively in that last quarter. And, he's nicknamed the Wizard, but I'm going to give him the nickname Hungry because he just goes for goals. He loves it. Loves a celebration.
Just a shame his accuracy is not great. So that's a bit of an issue in itself. If he got better accuracy, we get to see more of those celebrations.
Yeah, but he's out for about 6 to 8 weeks now with a syndesmosis. So it's really big blow for Hawthorn. So a few big outs there.
Yeah, so I think that end of the day, I think the Hawks will be looking for that first win, have to wait another week, but Collingwood will go into the bye 2-3 and starting to get back on the right track. But Ollie, enjoy the drive over to Adelaide. I'm sure to
look forward to it.
Yeah, great weekend over at Gather Rounds. But thank you very much for watching the Footy Frontline podcast. We'll be back next week to review all Gather Rounds and look ahead to round 5 in the AFL.